most B2B SaaS founders are drowning in marketing, but can't really figure out what's moving the needle, what's driving revenue, and they're tracking everything, but a lot of it doesn't even matter. So, how do you track what matters? Welcome back to another episode of Growth Vertical. Today, we're joined by a special guest, Kenny Ridgell, founder and CEO of Ridge Media, a marketing firm that applies specialist tactics and a scientific method to marketing. We will discuss how early stage SaaS startups and software startups can cut through the analytics noise and focus on how to get the most out of their marketing and how to get their business up and running in the sense that they can achieve sustainable growth and drive growth much sooner. Kenny actually will help unpack quite a few frameworks and insights, right? Having him in the show here for tracking and how we can get SaaS startups to be successful on the tracking front and how to get the most out of a lot of their resources spent. So Kenny, thanks for hopping onto the show here. It's great to have you. It's exciting to have you here. How you doing?
Doing great. I appreciate you having me today as well. And yes, like you said, it's very challenging and it can also be very cost prohibitive in terms of setting some of these things up. So one of the things we try and do is always keep in mind being very agile and being efficient in the spend and making sure that every dollar you spend actually comes back to you and has a purpose. So at the end of the day, you can end up spending a lot of money on this and then not exactly getting the program or the setup that you were looking for.
What would be good is if everyone knows sort of how where you sort of started, right? Because it was a bit of a transition for you, right, in the beginning as well. So going from biochemistry to marketing, could you just tell us a bit about how things even started with you? How did you even do that?
Yeah, exactly. So I was in biochemistry trying to be a dentist, actually, which is very different from what I do now today. But
Wow.
I got all the way into dental school, passed the DAT, which is a qualification test. And my dad is a dentist, and he was like, "You need to go take an entrepreneurship course and figure out, how to run your own company, because that's something that I missed out on, was the business perspective. So I have to pay a lot of people and employ people to help run my analytics and run the company." And so I went into class, and one of the professors challenged us, "Hey, would you come up with a project or something that you can create a fake business around, or at least pitch, and go through an evaluation process." And of course, it's all basically a fake Shark Tank. And we came up with an idea to launch a app that told you happy hours, food specials, concerts, the thing that mattered to you when you're in college or in uni and you're trying to, find the place you can afford to go drink and eat. And through that process, I've started trying to sell ads to a lot of different businesses. A lot of businesses told me, "I don't really need help on my advertising in terms of an app, but I need help with my social media. I need help with my CRM. I need help quantifying and really tracking where our leads are coming from, and then monetizing specifically what channels are working." Because the old adage came to play a lot. 50% of my marketing is working, 50% of my marketing is not working. The problem is I don't know which 50% works. So through that, I applied my scientific method, in the way my brain works, is much more of an experimental type of situation. And so in simple terms, we literally started with the idea of, look, let's take 3 or 4 buckets, if you will. Let's spend the same amount of money, and buckets being a channel, and then let's use artificial intelligence, layer in the tracking, layer in a CRM, and see exactly what your cost per lead is and what your cost per sale is. I was gonna say, at the end of the day, it's you learn quickly what you don't need to spend more money on. You know what I mean? Once you put the proper tracking in, you're like, one of those buckets or two of those buckets is a dry bucket, and then you realize that all your leads are coming from 1 or 2 or 3 channels. So you want to just make sure you can get to that answer as quick as possible, so you don't waste any more money than necessary.
I mean, I think that's a big thing right now, right? Because there's a lot of competition on just the marketing front in general. Everyone went digital. Actually, that's how I even got to marketing, right? I knew that we were going digital. And just like you said, with uni and that sort of thing, we used to spend a lot of our time trying to look at all the flyers that were getting sent through the post or handed out by the student union reps. And we were like, okay, let's circle the ones that we're going to go out on next week or in a few days. But if that was on our phones or everything, that would have been way easier, so that we could actually track it and things like that. And actually, they would know, right? Which how are they going to even track a leaflet or a flyer in the first place? But
Exactly.
I think it's a big thing. Even day to day, yeah. Even day to day, I have to go through the idea of, okay, how do we even know what's working? And I think that's where we have to sort of reverse engineer the metrics, make sure we're looking at the right ones, make sure we're not looking at just likes and engagement and that sort of thing only, right? But looking at really, really, really important metrics. So I think that's how, I guess if I'm not wrong, then that's how you actually went into Ridge Media, right? That's how you got that started.
Exactly, because I realized that I wasn't going to sell ads for the app, and then I ended up finding a lot of these clients that were requesting my services on the marketing front. And at the time, I was being scrappy, and I was just researching a lot, and I found a variety of different like AI tools you could plug in. One of them being CallRail. I'm sure a lot of people might be familiar with that, but it literally tells you the user journey of like when these people found you. What, like, say if they went for Google keyword search, they went to Facebook. You would see each of your touches or your impressions, and then it gives you a true ability to record the phone call, monitor, like literally qualify them as a good lead or bad lead. And then you can, once we have integrated in with an API to your CRM, regardless of what you're using, now it'll give you one-to-one data recognition of like Neil Patel. Okay, he came through Google, and then he saw our Facebook ad. He went to our YouTube, then he called in, and we booked him, and he was like $50,000 worth of revenue. Okay, well, what did those 3 touches cost us? And then Kenny comes through. He clicked 12 times, didn't buy. Why did Kenny not buy? What are the messaging not tell Kenny? And why did we waste like $100 on those 12 clicks with Kenny? Well, was our messaging not clear? Was he not in the right audience? And you really just want to get the idea of what is working and then rinse and repeat it, right? So, okay, this one funnel is working. Then we need to turn off the other funnels and drive all the traffic to this one funnel that's apparently like clicking with people.
Yeah, I think when we first got like connected with you, is I found that did I hear something or read something about you helping like a client save over like $4,000 or something monthly on
Yeah,
their campaigns or something like that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Actually, even more is
and it
like
was
200,000.
yeah. Oh
Yeah, and
wow.
it's
Okay, a month.
no, like a year, but it was a significant amount of money.
Yeah,
He
that
would he was spending a bunch of money on more or less. We're not trying to make fun of him, but he was spending it on Yellow Pages digital ads, which is like YP, and I think they've changed names again now. Not to single them out, but
yeah
he was like buying the cover page of the Yellow Pages, and I like met him, and then he was buying a bunch of online ads through like the TV stations locally who were doing digital. And he was basically just wasting a bunch. He wasn't really specifically targeting even people who had the right income levels. He was wasting his spend. He was doing much more of a brand awareness in a community driven area, but he was B2B focused, right? He's a heating and air plumbing and electrical client. They're trying to sell to specifically like large scale like commercial buildings. So he doesn't need like even me looking at his ads in my house on a Tuesday when I'm watching ESPN. He needs to catch people who actually have decision making capabilities of a company of that magnitude that would buy that. And by
yeah
showing him quickly within 90 days, we're able to like turn off his campaigns and his like targeted contracts and go ahead and just run the ads on the campaigns and channels that worked. And we were with him for 5 years before he sold, and he went from 7 million to $25 million in revenue.
wow, that's incredible. So that's a big jump, right? And you
Yeah,
helped him you helped him
yeah,
decipher where he's losing money, which is fantastic. So
exactly.
but I think that's what's crazy, right? So when we look at tactics, and I know we're going to talk about like tactics specifically, but looking at those tactics, they are very broad. And there's something about tracking and talking about tracking what matters that's important to having a laser focus as well. Because
Right.
then aren't we talking about tracking what matters is what matters technically when you are targeting the right people? Now you can actually get down to that data and say, okay, how many impressions has this account got, or has this person got, or how many clicks have they had, right, in the last X amount of days if you're retargeting them. Um, why do you think that? Why do you think measurement matters more now, though? Because especially with resource constraint SaaS and software startups, for example.
I think there's a lot of noise in the market, and there's so many places you can be. And I think sometimes your desire is like, okay, I need to be on everywhere. I mean, I'll put it this way: for B2B people, the desire a lot of times is to be on Facebook or to be on Instagram. And it's not always the exact place where their customer is going to be, or where their customer is going to be looking to make that buying decision. Of course, you could probably get some like brand awareness through it, but your direct conversion value from that page or channel is not going to be very high. So, I mean, one of the things we look at is, if you're looking at your CRM, like you want to even have people getting different messaging based on where they are in the funnel. So we use a program called Stack Adapt, which is like programmatic advertising, and if we can integrate directly through an API into your CRM. And the best part is, so your sales team, they can actually get the data. So say Neil again comes in, he's looking at he's looking at plumbing, and he's looking at these different types of products, maybe like a tankless water heater for his hotel. He wants to like buy 50 of them. By the time you call in, it whisper messages to the person who's answering the phone. Neil Patel, he came from Google Campaign looking at 50, and it'll tell him what pages on the website, and it'll tell him what you're looking at. So our team is automatically triggered into what exactly he needs to talk on, what topic he needs to cover, and then like what kind of magnitude of a client you are. So all that stuff just like arms your team with more data. And then on the back end, so you put him in like, okay, Neil comes in, he's a cold lead. We're doing still brand awareness, telling him about like how good we are, maybe a case study. You have another meeting. We move your middle of the funnel. Okay, Neil's moving through the process. you need a little bit more specified ads that are directly based on what tags are on your name in the CRM. So now we have tankless water heaters. So the ads can be about tankless water heater, about the savings you get from that, about the perks for your guest as a hotel, because we know you're a hotel owner. So you basically can set up these different tags within the CRM, and the more information you feed the CRM and the more campaigns you have created, sub campaigns, they can serve those people direct messaging. So I mean, if we're competing against another plumber and we're talking directly about like, here's like how much money you save, the cost savings effect, all the different like benefits of your guest when they have these opportunities in their hotel. And then at the bottom of the funnel, you're basically having like a direct call to action saying like, go ahead and book. So as you move that person through the funnel, they're literally the messaging they're getting is talking to them about what products they're interested in, and changing as they get adapted through the channel.
Yeah. And I think that now that you're saying that, it looks like it's a very like rigid structure on actually trying to understand the touch points that they had with the business or with the brand. But I think that's what brings me into the current tracking situation, right? I think everyone knows because they can track, nobody knows what to track, one, right? And then two, if they do know what to track or they do try and track anything, they try and measure everything, right? That's the problem. So like have you? I'm guessing you found out, right? They try and measure everything across the board,
Everything,
and
yeah.
then yeah, and then what do you
It's
think the problem is with that? Like, why do you think that's such a problem?
I would call it like over analysis is paralysis. Like, how do you make a decision if you're trying to weigh out everything? I mean, we try and simplify to like pick 2 or 3 KPIs, and then what specifically matters to you is revenue. Honestly, most business owners don't keep their agencies very long if they don't provide ROI and don't provide money in their pockets. So we want to go back, and we will like tie ourselves directly into the CRM, get a seat on the CRM, and have one of our team members like, and I recommend everybody do this, having like a manager actually listen to the calls, go back, tie the strings together to see where your ROI is. And don't be overwhelmed by so many numbers. Everybody like likes or impressions, and those things are of course good and effective to measure, but it doesn't matter if you're not getting in front of the right people. So I always like to say, like on-site engagement on your website's a really good tool to measure the number of calls that last a certain amount of time, right? So if somebody calls and only spends a minute and a half on the phone, probably not the best lead. So like you're looking for appointments booked, and you're looking for like different metrics that really actually matter to the sales team. I almost think, and a lot of times people want to say marketing metrics, it's really sales metrics. Like if you're a sales manager, what kind of report would you want to have? That's what we're trying to set up for our clients. And the best way to do
Yeah,
it is
I
like
think
by simplifying what that looks like. If you have a sales meeting and you're going through 90 things, it's terrible.
I think one of the important things is as well. Now that you say that, it it makes you really try and when you look at the snapshot, like from a high level, right, of tracking overall, and them having to connect the dots together. The idea of automating reporting and all of that is great, but I think automation can also involve some complexity, right? So now we have AI and things like that that people try to throw numbers into and like get things out, but in the end, it's just the basic insights. They don't understand the context behind the situation. So do you almost feel like it's almost like you said to get a seat in the CRM? Do you almost feel like it's important to have a driver looking at the data to say, or listening to the calls and being like, oh yeah, now that we look at these reports and we drill down into the data, we're able to now understand that yes, this campaign did have an impact. Do you think that you always need that one person that's like the driver to go into the data? I think that's how like you probably noticed that revenue ops has probably evolved that way. It's not just about connecting the data and that's it. Put it on a dashboard and that's it. But like I think automation has also involve or introduce more complexity. That's why we need an actual person to understand the context at the driver's seat.
I completely agree, and a lot of times the owners try and do that, and of course we want the owner in the meeting, and we want them to be aware of what's going on, but they're too busy to have the bandwidth to manage like what you really need to be getting in on. And a lot of times, like people want to put their marketing director in that seat, and I always say no. I mean, marketing director, how closely tied are they to revenue?
Yeah, so we're back, Kenny and I, just to kind of like sort of put a bit of an intro here again. We've been trying to reschedule this call for about, I think it's been twice now, isn't it, Kenny?
Yeah,
Um,
a couple
but there was,
times.
yeah, there was just some busy and some like some technical issues. But yeah, we're here now, guys. So we're going to finish this off. So last point was that we were discussing the idea of having a sales director looking at the metrics instead of a marketing director because they're normally closer to revenue. Generally, if you get this portion wrong, a lot of people sort of notice that there's a lot of internal conflicts raised, right? But what does that mean, Kenny? When I say that, what does that actually mean, especially when it comes to marketing and sales?
Yeah, it actually looks like a lot of finger pointing. There's a somebody's going to basically have to report to ownership and then blame the other person if it's not correctly done. And what we're trying to avoid is basically the owner trying to make the decision of like, is it my marketing bad or my sales this bad? Because the owner should really not have to be put in that position. And if the marketing agency is working in tune and in step with the sales team, it should be an understanding of really what is the issue? Is it the lead quality? Is it the sales process? Is it both? And I think trying to provide that transparency to the owner lets them be able to make much more of an educated decision. And from an agency perspective, one of the main things you don't want to do is be blindsided when you walk into a meeting. Like I always give this example. Like I had this happen to me at one point. I came into a client and I said, "Look, man, we had you spent $30,000 this month. We had over like $375,000 of revenue come back in. It's like a 10-to-1 ROI. We had a great month." And I remember the client looked at me dead in the face. He said, "Last month I lost $125,000." And I'm like, okay, well, there's nothing like you can't really sit there as a marketer and be like, we had a good month, like pumping your chest saying we did so good, and then he's losing money. He doesn't care how good you did. So what I had to boil down to is like he had a lot of leads coming in, and there was also a lot of lack of retention on the backside. So we were just putting water into the boat. There's a hole on the other side of the boat just coming right out. So the
Yeah,
idea was like we need to plug the hole because from like we can only do so much as a marketer. If you're getting 10-to-1 ROI, but the owner's still like losing money, he's not going to keep you on for a long time, or he might not stay in business for a long time. So one of the things we had to do is try and okay, well, what's that look like? Do we need to help him with his customer retention? What are his like communication skills look like? And at that point, you can use your automated marketing tools to do customer retention, to use your CRM, not for just like nurturing, but also for like client relationship management. And we had to like kind of step into like almost how do we market to our current customers rather than just marketing to new customers. But I mean,
yeah,
that's just a perfect example of like whenever you get this thing wrong, you can come in completely blindsided as an agency and like be like just completely oblivious to where the actual business's health is. And there's only so much you can do as a marketer in terms of proving your value if the business is not healthy overall.
yeah. It sort of reminds me of the. I guess it's a good segue into the next part of the topic, right? Because it's that whole idea of following the wrong metrics as well. I saw it sort of sets up bad practice at one point as well, because marketers tend to, and this actually agencies and growth teams like ours, the marketers just tend to sort of follow the wrong metrics at one point. But so they follow the vanity metrics. And we talk about how we should steer away from those and make sure that whatever metrics we're tracking has a direct influence on revenue. But there is one thing to this entire thing, right? This entire talking topic, and that's, and you guys must experience it a lot. Do you find that leadership at whatever client you're collaborating with, or even if this is in house, do you find that leadership usually are the influence behind us or marketers tracking vanity metrics? Like, have you guys found that there's an influence in that? I feel almost like marketers are pushed sometimes to follow the vanity metrics because they're under so much pressure to, yeah, I don't know, gain something on the unrealistic metric KPI front, right? Like to meet the most unrealistic goal. Like, have you
Yeah,
guys found that too?
absolutely. And I think one of the main things is like setting the expectations for the client up front. I mean, I always like to try and say this in the meetings. Like, over time, I've learned it's kind of a good way to set the standard. Like I always say, marketing is like a heartbeat. You're going to have ups and downs every month. And I think that sometimes the expectation from leadership can be that we just want to see this like clean line that's just going in a growth trajectory. Whereas like as a marketer, that like based on all the other variables in the market, we're going to have great months and we're going to have like down months, and it's going to kind of come up and down in waves. And you basically just need to prepare your client to understand that as it goes up and down, that's expected. You can't just expect this continuous uptick. But sometimes as a marketer, you're afraid to mention like, okay, well, it was a down month. So you start focusing on these vanity metrics because the leadership's putting pressure on you to like never have a down month. There's so much like, anxiety behind like delivering to where sometimes you go to the meeting, you're like, well, it wasn't a bad month. We had a lot of impressions. So you start focusing on some vanity metric that makes you sound better. And I honestly found that whenever we started hiring people from other agencies and training them, that was something we had to almost untrain out of like our new hires, was that people they would
Really?
everything's green, the dashboard's good. And so they'd like go in the meeting and they would almost like, I always call it like analysis by like over analysis paralysis, like we talked about before. The idea being that like you get in this meeting, the client's almost like glossing over, you're just giving them too much information overload. Everything's green whenever in their mind everything's not green. So now you're basically like those vanity metrics become like completely like they don't even know whether to trust you or not because you're just kind of feeding them smoke and mirrors. and they don't know how to cut through the noise.
Yeah. Actually, now that you say that, I had no idea that this you had to actually untrain the aspect of that from other agencies themselves, which actually to say sounds like with your operation and your agency, you guys have already sort of you've trained beforehand to avoid that in the first place or prevent that, right? You've got the best practice down. That's actually surprising that an agency, someone who you would hire, collaborate with, or other agencies, not yours, of course, because you've sort of hammered that out of people. It's more so a case of that's interesting that they're actually following bad practices, not even bad best practices, or you could probably even say that bad best practices from back in the day, just simply because of that. Do you think that? I mean, do you have like an example of a time where you saw like a major loss, like with a client because they were like optimizing for engagement, or maybe the marketer was in charge of optimizing for engagement instead of revenue?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I would say I have one really clean example that's a hotel that we have in mind. And we hired this staff member. They had come from a hospitality based agency. We brought him in, and this hotel is like very remote. It's more like weddings and like corporate retreats. I would say it's mainly a corporate retreat hotel. It's a boutique type property. It only has like 30 rooms. The
Mm.
idea being that room nights, booking per room night is not the metric they're looking for. But on our end, and they also don't need a ton of impressions. It's not a matter of like the amount of likes, and like social media virality is going to help them book corporate retreats. They need to have like in touch. It's more of a B2B campaign than it is a B2C campaign, right? Despite it being hospitality. We had this new agent, account executive go into the meeting, telling this person how great everything was. All the numbers are green. They're basically all the graphs are going up. And I think sometimes you're so scared to deliver that like bad news of it being a down month that you just kind of massage the numbers to make it sound better than it actually is. And
Yeah.
we went in with this client, and like we've been with the client had been here, our client, for maybe like 2 or 3 years. So this was just a new account executive on the account. And actually our point of contact at the client kind of coached my staff member, which was probably not the best situation. But he was like, look, we didn't have we had look, I'm glad that we had like 20 ancillary room nights booked this month. I'm glad that we had that, but our revenue was like $150,000 off because we didn't have any group settings that came in at all. So just because you had a lot of website visitors, because you had a growth in rooms booked per night, she didn't see the business picture as a whole. She's just saying like, oh, we had more rooms booked on like single solo stays. We had more weeknights booked. We had all these different like positive growth in her mind. But the biggest overarching missed picture was the fact that we had no meetings or conferences or retreats. And that's like they're a retreat based business. So by basically her not coming in and understanding, she was applying her historical, like, agency knowledge of a situation where she's like, oh, we had more room nights, we had more bookings, we had more website traffic, we had more of this. And she
Yeah.
wasn't looking at it. I was like, you've got to understand the business as a whole. And thankfully, he was our client point of contact, was able to like coach her a little bit and be like, hey, look. And I was in the meeting with her too, and it was one of those things where like I prepped with her to go through this, and then she kind of just went AWOL, and it was almost like the client was getting a little frustrated with the bad results and the bad month, so she felt the need to just like paint this pretty picture. And sometimes it's better just to just be bluntly honest. Like, look, it was a down month. We didn't hit our metrics. We've got like we know what we did wrong. Here's the solution to the problem, not just focus on the problem. And I think a lot of times we can be like, as agency people, you focus like you're problem centric rather than solution centric. It's like coming with solutions because the clients know there's a problem. If you just focus on the problem, we talk about the problem all the time. Clients not really feeling any warm and fuzzy about like where the next steps are going to go. And I think a lot of times, like if you mask all the bad things, you're really just doing yourself a disservice because at some point you've got to deliver bad news. You can't just always good, 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 good. It's just unrealistic.
Yeah. I think that's that whole like it's just like it's the culture at the end of the day, right? On how you can get the entire marketing team and your partners, marketing partners like agencies and everyone that you've got on your roster to have that one aligned cultural, like I guess segue, right? Like with that point, right? And I think one, it's almost like gravity for the entire field. So long we're all grounded in that one thing and we're prioritizing the impact of what our initiatives are doing, that's more important. So even if it's good or bad, it doesn't matter whether it is bad. You can say, well, okay, we ran it like this last time. Maybe the audience wasn't great. Maybe the offer wasn't great. Maybe the message wasn't good for the audience, right? Pinpoint what actually went wrong. Try something else, and then if you can get that to good, then you're actually working towards impact, opposed to just activity or hours just invested into that one initiative just for the sake of it. So I do get what you're saying. Well, I get, and I think that sort of brings me into like tracking tools, right? Because and you guys probably get asked, well, you might get asked this, right? But when you guys have a client on board, so for example, or you guys are helping a client, have you found that they're trying to use every single new tool out there, or they're like, oh, we heard about this tool, this is like the holy grail almost, right? Have you found that there's a lot of distraction and it sort of takes them away from actually having an impact, or they're trying to track too much, right? We talked about tracking too many metrics earlier in the session. Do you find that they also, tools wise, they tend to just use too many or
Yeah,
too
and
little?
even like from an experimentation perspective, like I'll give you an example, like what we teach our team in terms of like trying to prove to a client that they actually got a full test. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this is experimentation, right? Like you're setting it back, you're like manipulating one variable. The mistake we can make as marketers is like take a LinkedIn campaign. Like I have one example where we have a client, he sells like architectural style like designs for hotels and for like a very niche audience, like restaurants kind of fall in that category. But long
Mm.
story short, what like whenever we took over, his internal team had been running ads, and they would layer a variety of interest into the ad, and they kept saying like well, like our programmatic ads aren't working, our Facebook ads aren't working. When we started looking in there, they're like they were blaming the platform, but what they hadn't done is like singularly identify what is the like which ones work and which ones didn't. They might have like 7 to 10 interests layered on top of it. They might have all these demographics later in. Like simplify that. Let's just test one individual interest. Okay, if we know that it needs to be a hospitality or a hotel owner we're trying to sell, let's just target only owners, not add in all these different other pieces. Because then if we know like it's not going to work to target just the hotel owners, it doesn't matter what you add on top. But the
Yeah.
thing you're watering down by doing is like putting so many of these interests in there, you don't know which one worked and which one didn't. So the problem is like singularly identifying and testing one variable, one thing at a time. And the same idea with like the tools, right? It's like, okay, instead of trying to test 9 to 10 tools at a time, let's test one or two tools independently and give ourselves true answers. Because the problem, I think, as a marketer, we can all be obsessed with like well, we have all this stuff at our disposal, but sometimes like when you put too much stuff at disposal, it makes it very granular in terms of like we don't know what was the part that helped us and didn't help us. Because I mean, if you're looking at two campaigns side by side and you have like 7 out of the 10 audience factors overlapped, one worked and one didn't. Okay, well you can easily say like there's the other three were the ones that like
Yeah.
caused one to work and not. But like what of the three worked? And I think that's the hardest part is you start getting this situation where your tests aren't actually giving you answers. And then like you go back to the client, you're like, well, we've proved that this does or doesn't work, but what did you actually prove? And it's kind of like back to the idea of like what you're saying, like when they get obsessed with like the new shiny object or like the so many different tools. And it's kind of the same idea as marketers can be obsessed with all the bells and whistles that you're given and you're like able to use at your disposal. But if you're not like strategically testing it, you really don't know. Like I'll take that client for example, the architect. Whenever we actually drilled all the way back down and we just went to a very simple, broad audience that was specifically based around hotel owners, we actually found that worked very well. But at the end of the day, when we started adding more and more layers on, it sometimes would not have the same level of result. So, like, it was not that like the ad campaigns weren't working. It was just that the matter of like the audience selection was not working. And it's, he'd been operating on the term of like, I can't market this thing. I'm not going to market it. I have to go to the trade shows. He was doing like 30, 40 trade shows a year. He had team members traveling all over. His travel bill is insane. He's like digital marketing doesn't work for me. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's just not possibly true. There's other architects that use digital marketing and they use it effectively. I just don't. I need to understand what kind of tests you've been doing. And in his mind, he's like, I've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this platform. It doesn't work. And in reality, it was like, well, your test that you're testing didn't actually give us a true answer of whether it worked or not because you had too much noise in your test. You got to like let's strip it back and figure out. Let's test one variable, one variable, one variable, one variable, and then you can manipulate variables on top of that once you figure out one variable that works. But you got
Yeah.
to identify what is the piece that's working and what's not.
Actually, it's interesting you say that because I remember just as simple as a Google Ads campaign. I remember there was one in my early days, actually very easy to pinpoint. The issue was went onto the Google Ads account whilst auditing it, and they were doing something with light fixtures, but for businesses. So they were B2B, but they were focused on setting up all those like HVAC systems and light systems and that sort of thing. But one of the problems was they had like a simple targeting a broad keyword, which was the word light, or phrase light fixtures, and I thought you've spent a lot of money on this one keyword, but it's not actually directly involved with your business. Yes, you offer it, but it's not B2B related. This is a very broad loaded term. You're targeting everyone in the B2C side as well. Anyone who's looking probably for a light fixture for their car or a house or whatever. And I'm like, you're not just this small tweak, just wrap it up in a better, like, you add a few more modifiers in it, like use a key phrase that's synonymous with your industry or people looking for it as at a business or at a warehouse or at a parking an auto lot or whatever it is. And I remember that small tweak, and then following the conversion metric on the end of that. One, the CTR dramatically increased, right? And so that you have a leading indicator saying, hey, more people found it resonating, so they can get onto the landing page. But the last thing was, I remember it was like 3 out of 5 converted within the first 2 weeks, right? And it was like 3 out of 5 key leads, right? Not even anything else. So I was like, hey, this small impact, but you guys spent tens of thousands on this broad
And
term.
they probably thought forever like Google Ads really doesn't work that well for us. It just is really expensive for what we get in return. If you'd asked them
They
before
wanted
you
to kill it.
went,
Yeah.
yeah, they like stop Google Ads. It doesn't work. And in
Yeah.
reality, their test that they had set up was not actually giving them an answer whether Google Ads was working was not. They just
Yeah.
didn't have the right variable selected.
Do you guys over at Rich Media actually recommend like a specific, for lean teams anyway, like SaaS startups, software startups in the B2B space? Would you guys recommend usually to teams what minimum viable tech stack that they should use for tracking? Like, hey, these, at least if you don't have much tracking tools in place, these are the key ones that you should just use. Just use these.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the main thing is, like you said before, like trying to select just a minimal amount in the beginning and then add to it. Because the main thing you don't want to do is like try and do too much. Like we're literally going right now and like having a client that basically a restoration business. Then at the end of the day, they basically like, say you have a hurricane or a flood or a fire. They're the type of people that comes in and like cleans that up. They even do crime scenes. But at the end of the day, like whenever we started working with them, they didn't have a CRM. They were basically kind of using like a call program like Ring Central, and they were just routing their calls and then monitoring who was calling people back. And they
Oh,
have a big board in their office. But I mean, they're like a $10 million business, maybe $12 million business, and they're selling mostly to commercial based businesses, right? So like some manufacturing plants or whatever. And so they're like talking about massive deals. They don't have to do many with commercial based restoration to fix things. And whenever we started looking at it, it was like, they wanted to immediately log into a CRM. They wanted to put in an automated like marketing campaign, and they wanted to have like an ERP, and they wanted to do it all at once. And I'm like, well, let's back all the way up and let's just like try and implement one CRM. And it was kind of like what we talked about before briefly, where you have like the stages of the CRM and your ads are tying in. I was like, look, sales fixes a lot of things. If we can just get the CRM set up, get the stages set up, integrate that into our ad campaign so that as people move through the stages, they actually get talked with different messages, and then we have a higher close rate. We actually don't even need to spend more money on marketing. We don't need to spend any more money on getting more people in the funnel. We just need to make our tailored messaging higher so that like our dollars go further. And then once we have the money, we can fund the ERP. And thankfully, we ran the campaign. We got it up and running. Within 6 months, we actually we created over $1 million of the revenue. They went from 9 to 10. They took that $1 million. Now at that point, we could come back in and like fix this ERP. But I almost felt like we might have needed to run from them in the beginning, because they wanted to like basically put in. And they also wanted to build a new website in the middle of all of that. So I'm like, well, we can't possibly build a CRM and an ERP and
it's
I'm
too many moving parts. Yeah.
I'm like, let's just do one thing and then fix that, and then we can build everything off of that. Because once you have the CRM, your website can integrate into the CRM. You're like, all these different tools can come from the CRM and can play off of that. But you've almost got to think of it as like a foundation. Like, what are we going to build our house on? Are we going to build it on sand, or are we going to build it on like a rock foundation? I think a lot of times if you build it around sales and marketing, you're building a correct tech stack. At least in today's like digital like heavy world, you almost need your marketing to be like your foundation, because it's feeding and funneling everything else. Like your ERP should be tied into where someone signs a contract. They're getting all onboarded. They're getting all their like materials set up and like lined out. Your team's getting prompted. Like we just did this for like Go High Level for a client of ours. Like they'll be like the moment someone signs a contract, they're automatically getting routed, getting sent an onboarding email. Our team's actually receiving like what we need to do from a marketing perspective to like onboard this customer. Their team is receiving like, hey, you need to reach out about X, Y, or Z. So it gives everyone their marching orders, and it communicates to the client right out of the gate the moment that we have the Go High Level, the contract signed. And Go High Level is kind of automating all of that. But at the end of the day, that's a CRM. It's not an ERP. and it still can do a majority of the kickoff process before they even touch the ERP. But at that point, like now you've solved a lot. Now you know what your ERP needs to do. You've already gathered all this information. You can feed it into there automatically, and that now you can build your ERP systematically, like based on what data you're going to gather. But if you're going to build your ERP first, what data are you going to put in from your sales funnel? Like you can't do it. You have to build the CRM first. And you have to figure out what data we need to build out the next steps. Because if you do it inversely, now you're going to try and I don't know, it doesn't work. You'd have to go. It would be too difficult.
Yeah, I've had. You know what? It's funny. It sort of brings me to this one story of this one client that never had a CRM to begin with. When I first went and audited them, I remember I asked them, "Hey, do you have a CRM?" So I said, "Where's all your client data stored? Then you boast you have this many clients. Where does this customer data live?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, so we do use HubSpot." So I'm like, "So you do have a CRM? Okay, great." But what I found is some people just use CRM for the CRM purpose, just to house customer information, and that's it. That's it. And so I say, is this not connected to your marketing system or your sales system? No, we have a separate sales system. We don't actually have any marketing stored anywhere in these systems. It's simply like an outreach list of leads, and all we do is we keep sending them emails, outreach emails. And I'm like, I was like, cold outreach is great, don't get me wrong, but to use that as your marketing contact management system as well is probably got to be the worst thing I've ever heard, because they're just made very differently, aren't they? Those systems are built in such a way to essentially they're called objects on the platforms, aren't they? So to handle every object and type of lead or type of contact differently. So I agree. I think a CRM starting thing is it's expensive. It is expensive, but there are cheaper alternatives now even to get started. And you can I don't want to put this out there. You can build a CRM with a Google Sheet, but I wouldn't recommend it because of how time consuming it can be for some people, and it depends on how complex your operation is, right? But that sort of brings me now to this North Star metric because that's where we started. Kenny, how for like teams that aren't so sophisticated at the minute with their tracking side of things, or they are tracking loads of things, but they just don't know whether they're tracking the right thing. How do you, like, if you had to give people advice on the best way to track down their North Star metric, how would you recommend they pick one out? And is it actually about picking one out, or is it based off of different contextual objectives? So, like, you're running a campaign for X, right? Or you're running, this is your initiative at the minute with this partner campaign. Like, how do you think people should go about picking out the right metrics so that they can track success better?
That's actually really a good question, but it's also a difficult question to answer. I would
Yeah,
say that my best answer to give that would be identifying from your current customers and what successes you have had, what was the common thread. So, like at the end of the day, it's harder to say that for startups because they don't have the current customers. So, sorry if you're a startup listening, I do have some other ideas on that. But if you're an
yeah,
existing business, like what we're trying to do is figure out what is the rinse and repeat method. Like what is something that worked with these people, made them our clients previously, and then how do we find out what the common thread is between that? And I mean, it honestly, like, it can go back to just as simple as like sales journaling, like sales journal. Where did these people come from? What interactions do they have? What questions do they have? What were the touch points that they saw before they came in? And then trying to identify like what was the one common thing. Like I'll put it this way: we just did a big contract with a trucking company, like their B2B. Sat down with them. The one common theme that they found from a variety of the funniest part was they're not specialized in this, but the one thing that everyone found out about them was the fact that they are specialized as an aerospace logistics coordinator. So I mean, there's only a minimal amount of people that need aerospace logistics, but in their mind, the one thing that a lot of people had like mentioned or talked about was the fact that they had like aerospace capabilities. Because I guess in their customers' mind, they were thinking, okay, well, if they can handle shipping an airplane, they can handle shipping whatever they have, whatever the heck I'm trying to ship. So the one thing we found was that like all the people that had bought from them previously knew the fact that they had the aerospace thing. They had either read or got an email or read an article somewhere about them having this capability of the aerospace. So we realized like on our ad front, we've been talking about all our other shipping capabilities, when really we need to just kind of humble brag about like we're one of the only certified companies in the area that can handle like airspace like logistics coordination. the one common thread between all of that. Whereas like we had all these sub segments and like niche audiences running and everything else, they did when we stepped in. I think they had a total of 300 landing pages. Like a no joke, they literally had 300 landing pages.
Yeah.
I'm like, the landing pages would be niche to like you're shipping LTL, you're doing refrigerated shipping, you're doing this, and then at the end of the day, like you're saying the same. They were saying the same thing that all their competitors are saying, and the one thing that like separated them out in the customer's mind that did buy was the fact that like, well, they're kind of like maybe they're bigger, they're more niche, they're more specialized, they can do this, they can handle aerospace. So it was funny because we just literally sent a survey out to their customers. We had like one-on-one meetings. We did a little focus group. I mean, it's back to like a grassroots marketing questionnaire, and we found out that like, well, what made you kind of choose them over your competitors? The aerospace capabilities was the one common theme, and then through that we realized like, okay, well, from that perspective, the one metric we picked out for us was, okay, well, let's scrap our landing pages. The best highest converting like journey is when the people see the aerospace. So now we like know how many people can we get to our aerospace landing page. That is who we see as our qualified leads. Those people are our hot leads. So we like basically pivoted the entire marketing campaign to basically drive people back to that page. And then it was like our KPI at the end of the month, we'd sit down with the customer and say, like, how many people came to your aerospace page? That's how many people we think were our like active leads that worked out this month, because we know that's going to be your competitive advantage against everybody else you're pitching against. So we know now we have like another 500 or 600 prospective leads because they found your aerospace page, which they're a massive shipping company that does all these different services. If we came in day one and said aerospace is going to be your biggest differentiator, if you can get people on that page, they'd have been like, we have Lockheed Martin, they're our one customer. They'd have been like, we don't need to spend any money doing aerospace. We can't even sell any other aerospace. But at the end of the day, like we figured out that was the common thread, so we changed our KPIs to being like, it's not website visitors, it's not phone calls, because they're getting phone calls. A lot of people are price shopping in that industry, right? So like a phone call wouldn't be considered a qualified lead. Like me and Neil might call in both today and both get different prices. We might never ship with them. We're just trying to get an idea of what it costs. But like if we can convince them, like, they could convince me and Neil that their biggest piece is they're like, hey, look, we're specialized. We can handle shipping anything. We ship from Lockheed Martin, and we ship like military style planes. Yeah. Okay, well now we have a competitive advantage because they're not the cheapest. They're not going to win by price. So if people are price shopping, they're going to lose. So in a good way, the KPI had to be way different than what you'd ever expected, right? You're like looking around and like trying to figure out all this different. Is it the number of phone calls? Is it the customer rep who gets them? Is it the salesperson? Is it the email drip campaign that we're sending out on the back end when they come out? Is it our pricing? And then really, no, it's really just like them understanding like the scope of work and like your skill set.
Yeah. I was going to say that actually ties into the whole idea of working towards impact opposed to just having activity, right? For the sake of activity. And I think that's what people get stuck on. They just go around that spiral of, okay, well, why don't we look at these leading indicators first? But I think that's where vanity doesn't become vanity, right? They're not completely useless. They're there in case you find out, maybe let's say you're not getting any conversions. Well, first off, how many people are on the damn page, right? In the first place. That's where you would use a leading indicator. Like, are we even getting any clicks from it? Oh no, we're not. That means what? We're probably bidding low, or maybe the messaging is wrong. That's where you would use leading indicators to get to the impactful metric. But I think people almost do it in reverse, don't they? They go leading indicator first, then revenue, and they probably not even revenue most of the time. They just stay stuck on leading indicator, because they're just like, hey, this is gonna make us look good. It's gonna make us feel good. Plus, this is what leadership's actually putting pressure on us on. And we're like, hey, no, this gives us like X amount. And actually, what you mentioned, it's prioritizing, isn't it? Like your impact and where you're going to have the most impact. You're putting your product marketing hats on, and you're saying we're going to prioritize this industry or this vertical because that's going to put more money into the business's pocket at the end of the day, and we're going to be serving the most value in a shorter amount of time to those people. So why are we worried about all the other noise? And I think with the amount of activity on the digital marketing front, like you said at the beginning, there's so much noise. How can we cut through the noise? And I think that's how you cut through the noise. You prioritize and go where the people are actually coming to you for a particular reason, and you capitalize on that reason, right?
Yeah, this was actually like a tough one to figure out because, from a marketing perspective, they're having a lot of call volume. They were getting a lot of requests for quotes. So, we're listening to the calls, we're monitoring the calls, we're seeing a lot of leads come in, and we're seeing a lot of quotes go out. They're not closing a lot, so the revenue is not going up. But from a marketing, it's back to that old adage of we're gonna like if we'd have played it like a traditional agency would have, we'd have pointed at sales and said sales just isn't doing a good job, or y'all's pricing is messed up, and we could have easily just sat there and pointed the fingers. But instead, by like trying to take it one step further and understanding why people had bought historically, we actually were able to like we could have totally lost that client. You know what I mean? Like in the first 90 days, we could have just been like, dude, it's not working. You're getting a ton of calls. Y'all like basically either aren't selling them or your prices are too high. I don't think marketing is going to work for y'all. But instead, by taking it one step further, trying to figure out where the actual customers came from, why they bought from us, and then layering that into our test, we were able to like create a client that's been a long-term client now. But I mean, obviously, we could have totally misstepped the whole situation and like had the like incorrect vision up front. And it kind of goes back to like all those other vanity metrics, like I think they had great impressions. All this stuff looked good from a marketing perspective. They're getting a ton of calls. They're getting a ton of form leads. They're getting a ton of like quality businesses getting quotes from them, but it's just not converting into dollars in their pocket. And of course, we could have just died on that hill of like, it's not our fault. We're getting good leads. We're getting good calls. Like, I don't know what's happening. Instead, just kind of go one step further. Like, what is that correct metric of like, what is the thing that's really making the decision people like change their mind to go with us versus somebody else?
Yeah, and I think that's you prioritized what was important for the client, right? Like straight away. So you were only able to even uncover that gem, if that makes sense. If you didn't have that pure focus to be like, what's actually going on? You had to go to the roots of it in order to even understand it. But again, what you tried to prioritize metric wise was the one metric that actually impacts their business. And it's like, where did most of the revenue come from? Right. So you had to go towards that. And again, that goes back to the piece of having the right people at the driver's seat to look at revenue based metrics opposed to just the vanity kind, which is becomes vanity when you look at it in isolation. That's the whole point of calling it vanity, because it makes you feel good just for a short moment in time.
We have like a training program for Facebook, and one of the examples we use in like the training video program is talking about an attorney, and they're like an estate planning attorney. So I mean, obviously, like people who do estate planning and trying to get their trust and their wills and everything in order, they probably come from a variety of different like backgrounds. You might have doctors, you might have attorneys, you might have people of any walk in life. Shoot, it could be entrepreneurs like us. We're trying to put together a trust or a will for our family. The idea of like, what is the common denominator? The one thing we found through like a variety of testing and everything, and like looking at their customer data and information, was that pretty much everybody that was a customer of theirs had real estate investments. So like from an estate attorney perspective, when we started setting up their audiences, we found out that whenever we targeted people who are real estate investors or who are interested in real estate investment, even if they didn't already have it done, they have to have a certain amount of money to be considering or thinking that way. We found that was like the one common denominator between all their clients and everybody that converted. So we basically knew now in all of our ad focus, we need to make sure that real estate is one of the key focuses we like basically put into our audience targeting. And that attorney just sold for 400 million. So I mean, he exploded when he figured out how to like what was the key to the cracker. He was like, okay, now I just got to target people, and so he started going to real estate investment symposiums, trying to meet people there. It gave him a whole nother like angle because he was going to like doctors associations. He was going to he was going anywhere he
across
thought
the board
people who had wealth would be, and he had like no like centric message. Now he knows like you go to real estate investment symposium, you're going to catch all those different walks of life anyway.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because it's like that. It always does start with the audience first, and you're going to get most of your bank shots always going to start with whether you're targeting the right people in the first place. So
Exactly.
that's where marketing tends to work or fail, essentially, right? And then how you're articulating the message to them. There's been a lot of insight. Do you know what? I feel like Kenny, we could like speak for like hours and hours about this because there's so many different angles we could attack. There's so many like different metrics we could even discuss in detail, right? Like what's important, what's not important, why it's not important. But I think what you've done here is like you've given with examples of some of the stuff that you guys have worked on as well. I think you've given some big pieces of advice and examples of how people could deal with things in the situation, especially if they're overwhelmed by analytics, or even if they're not making use of them in the right way. But I think, I mean, I don't know if you have anything you want to like sort of close out on, but I'd say that that was actually a good note to close out on because it showcases to people like how important it is to actually start from ground zero, if that makes sense, and revisit what the root is, the audience, like you mentioned, and then go moving forward from there and making sure that all of those things are tied up first before you start to look at those vanity pieces of those vanity metrics again in isolation. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I would just say in terms of like
a takeaway, I would say always start with your current customers. That's like one of the best things you can do is like these people already work with you. They already made the decision to work with you. You can learn the most about what's going to work for your marketing based on what your current customers say about you, and then like why they made the decision to come to you. And I think so many people overlook that because we want to overcomplicate things as marketers. Sometimes that is like a natural, and partially in sales, people do the same thing. So almost just like keeping it simple and just going back to the basics. And like I hate to say on a digital marketing podcast where we're talking about all these high level like strategies, a focus group can be your best friend. And of course you can layer in that stuff and like go like try and figure out ways to make it digital, so you can make like surveys and forms and everything like that, so you can like actually track it and get real answers out of it. But at the end of the day, like that true test of just customer conversation and like really feedback is going to be something that just can't be overlooked. And I would highly recommend a lot of people don't do that. I mean, you don't talk to your customers frequently, ask them why they bought. And you might say, where did you hear of us or something like that? You might try to be determining their source. You're not determining the messaging that convince them to come over. So if you're like doing any level of like onboarding and your question, like, how'd you hear about us? Take that one step further. Like, how'd you hear about us and what made you decide to go with us against our competitor? And that sentence alone is going to give you a whole lot more than just how'd you hear of us. Because at the end of the day, people might think they heard of you in different ways, but it's not always what made them make the buying decision.
I think there's going to be a lot of people that have more questions about this. So I think if they wanted help from like Ridge Media and yourselves, right, to even get certain things off the ground, because it could be a lot of startups that probably will struggle with something like this. How can they actually connect with you guys to sort of kick things off, or if they ever wanted to inquire to potentially work with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our website. It's ridgemediallc.com. And if not, you can check me out on LinkedIn. My name is Kenny Ridgell. We don't charge anything for our upfront consultations. I'd be happy to at least like lay out a blueprint. And honestly, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so like I wake up in the morning and get excited about going to help people with their startups and their companies themselves. And part of that joy is like just trying to crack the code or like solve the puzzle. So if you're starting out, you don't know where to start, you don't have any current customers, you're trying to figure out this whole thing, even if you have just a few customers and some of the information might not be applicable to you, please reach out. If you are a full-size business and you have everything kind of running, you just want to get an understanding of what your like North Star metric is, feel free to reach out to us too. We can always do an audit. We're not going to charge money. I just want to start a relationship, have a conversation, and see if there's ways we can work together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what I'll do for everyone as well to make it easier is I'll link those links in the description / notes. So thanks, Kenny, for coming on. I think it's super insightful and super valuable. But I think there's probably scope in the future if there's any like developments in the industry as well, or even with you guys at Ridge Media. It'd be good to sort of have you back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back on and love to continue the conversation. Hopefully we can work together on some of these B2B clients and help people achieve their dreams.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Take it easy and see you soon.